Hello again. Let's have a look at some more details about the form we built in part 1 of our tutorials, and actually let's augment that a little and have a little bit more a look on some features like visibility and local or just new variables here. First of all, I want to have another look at the text box here with the last name where we have set the validation. We have set it simply to has value, just for remembering. When we remove it, we get the invalid input marker here. So when we set the validation to some of these values, we got the error message here. We talked about that. We also got validation calls on mobile and columns on tablet. This is simply just telling that validation element here, which is meant to be inside a table, which we talked about in part 1. But when we go to mobile, this could be a little longer validation message. So when we put some more text in here, and then we actually trigger the validation, it has more space to be displayed. That looks perfectly well in tablet, and on mobile looks good as well. So that's about this. Okay, let me just remove this message here and quickly walk over the different options of validations that we have. So we have a simple has value. We got an email validation, which simply means whatever I write, as long as it's not an email, it might be triggering the validation. So it's a very simple email validation, which is completely correct. When I'm not submitting, I'm going back to my data. We got a numeric, which actually requires the input to be a number from 0 to whatever, an integer number. But we also have the custom regex, where we can put our own regex validation into it to have a flexible validation. In that moment, we're using a validation here, which allows only capital and lowercase characters and numbers and some extra signs. So, but if we are using signs which are not allowed, we get the validation. The last validation in the list is JavaScript. And again, this is how the entire data app thing is designed. You always have an easier approach with working with no code to build advanced data apps, but there is always a simple way to bridge to Nerdland, where you can actually say, instead of using the built-in simple features, I need more because my customer requires certain behavior, and that can't be built with just drag and drop. Then in any of that areas, you will find the ability to work with your custom JavaScript. So in that case, when we turn this to JavaScript, the validation message disappears because it's now handled by the JavaScript, so to keep this more flexible as well. So we have a very simple function here, which returns depending on the new value. So new value is a parameter the function gets passed, which is actually the value the user enters. And the question is this value valid or is it not valid? So what we're doing is we're asking if there is somewhere in the string, if there is a no. And if there is a no, it says, please do not use no, and otherwise it gives back OK. OK means that this validation is successfully completed. So whatever I type here, it will work pretty nice. But when I start typing no somewhere, it actually, the validation kicks in. You can easily imagine that you can do everything with new value here. You can have also multiple line function. You can use typical if sense if you want to. So what you can do is say if new value is equals hello, then we return yes. So in that case, okay. And whatever else is the case, we return not okay. So let's just do it like this, and it will work as well. So we have a simple script which is doing the validation here for us. So let's type something in, and whatever we're writing, it's not okay. But if we say hello, it will go away, and we have a valid validation. So that's about the ways what we can do with validations. When we have a look at this input, so let me just remove this for now here. So when we look at the input, there's also a selector for field type, where you can switch between new variable and existing DB field. Existing DB field, just for a reminder, gives us the list of all the fields which are coming from our database, which we are passing through. We can also create our own fields here, or variables, in that view. And how we do that is pretty simple. So let's say we want to make a checker if something. Let's say we want to have a checker, which actually we can maybe show or hide some other values. So what we do is we do the same thing. We put a caption in here in our grid. Or table. We say let's say we say show email, and then we are creating another input field. And this input field, we create a new variable. So now we are able to define the name of our variable, and we define a default value, for example, like no. Since we're using yes and no because we want to actually change the control type from a text box to a checkbox. And the checkbox, and this is stated here, always returns yes or no as values. That's a very typical thing for cross-media. You have to get used to this. It's compatible and in line with the values of the checkboxes that are using in forms. You can actually do some layout changes here to how that checker behaves, changing the distance of the label and the checkbox, and all that units are provided in EM. EM is a relative unit to the text size, which actually gives you one advantage, because if I change the text size, everything scales with it. So that's just pretty nice. So let me just undo this. And I think you will get along with that settings by playing around with them. But for example, one nice thing is you can also put that on the right side or on the left side. We also could change the label text here. If I remove the entire label here, the show email now appears here where we don't want to have it. But if we remember how we can control items in the grid, we can go on the checkbox, and for table cell properties, we actually say place in column 2. Then it goes from column 1 to column 2, and so the flow is back where we want to have it. Good, so this is now a field which creates a variable which we now can use. So let's say we are having an email field here. So let's put another caption in here. Let's call this caption, let's put it like this, email. And then we take another input field and we grab the email address from our database, which we might don't have access to. So we need to go back to the database, to the campaign database, and down here in the web API settings, we turn on the email. I realized that's maybe only occurs here for the current beta release. I realized that sometimes this is not directly taken over to the view. So when you are missing that field, so just go back and forth and see if we have the field. And if you're missing that field, you can simply refresh the view and we will have the email here. Okay, so we got our email here, and we do, so when we now see that these fields are maybe, we need more space for them to take up, we can do that, by the way. We can actually go to the table, and then on the tablet settings here, we can actually say that the column 2 width is at minimum, let's say 300 pixel. Oops, not 3000, but 300. So now it looks a little bit, we got more space here. So when we have now the email and we have this, and now we have the show email. So what I want to do is I only want to show the email field here if the email is actually selected, which I can do by using the visibility item, which is very handy, because when I take the visibility item, I can throw things in there and they will keep their table layout. So I don't have to care. It's kind of non-existing. A little bit like in version 7. People who are used to that might know that concept. So this visibility now gives us a condition type here. And again, I can have a simple condition or JavaScript code. So what I can do is, with a simple condition, I can say And now I got my variable here as a property. You see, it's not a database field, it's a property, show email. So on the right text side, I enter yes. So when you see it immediately hides the email. So when I click on this, it now shows the email. And of course, I can use this new generated variable like any other variable everywhere. So when we go to our label field on top here where we show the first name, we can also, for example, show in the JavaScript syntax here, we can go to show email here and just display this as well. So it shows no now. If we click it, it goes to yes. And it in the same moment displays the email field, which is nice. Of course, visibility also influences if validation is done. So if a field is not visible, it will not be submitted and it will not be validated. One more thing to that syntax here. For example, it also supports very simple markdown styles like bold and quote. We got two more styles to the basic text style. So when we want to do, for example, the first time we want to display this in bold, we simply say that this should be surrounded by stars. And if I do so, it automatically picks up the bold style, which I now can easily change here. Which gives you actually a lot of power for having nice user interfaces and displaying text in a meaningful manner. The visibility, just one look back here. Besides simple condition, we can also do JavaScript code, which is a simple expression where you can simply say some value equals some value. So let's go back and do the same thing in the JavaScript here. We can say that show email. We can say show email should equal yes. And it will do the same job. Okay, thanks so much for listening to another advanced data tutorial and see you soon for part 3.